Gasoline electric hybrid. Sounds like a good idea. Maybe not. We'll give you some insight this week on Motoring 2002.
TSN's Motoring 2002 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
When I dropped into my local coffee shop this morning, somebody asked me if I ever get tired of everyone always wanting to talk to me about cars, and I said absolutely not. But I did add that while the subject of high fuel prices comes up in a lot of those conversations, very few people ask me about fuel consumption. They're more interested in how big and powerful the engine is. And you know, all you have to do is look in your mirror these days and you'll probably find a large sport utility on your tail. Seems these days, for some people anyway, bigger is better. And you know, that must frustrate a lot of car companies. Car companies like Honda. I mean, we're about to take back our long-term Honda Insight. Good-looking car, 80 miles to the gallon on the highway, and it's a sales flop. We'll talk more about that later on. But back to those car conversations, of which many of them are with women who, they tell me, make most of the decisions when purchasing a new vehicle. But many women still feel they don't get the respect they deserve when they're in the service bay. Well, this week we're going to meet Michel Jansen. She is a manager with Midas, and as we're about to see, she spends a lot of her time helping women help themselves.
When you are driving an older car, they often start to burn oil, they start to leak oil, and you have to make sure that you keep your oil level up. If you run out of oil, you'll ruin your engine.
The goal isn't to learn how to fix your own car. The goal is to not feel intimidated, to be able to feel confident about maintaining your car. A lot of people feel scared. You know, they hear a noise, they think maybe their wheel's going to fall off, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't take much knowledge to feel a lot more comfortable with your car.
It's not necessarily good for the winter.
It's been really popular. I had a waiting list of over 100 people wanting to sign up. I designed it to be small groups of 15 per course, so we've been working our way through the waiting list.
So what you do is you pull it out, wipe it off with a rag. It's a good idea to keep a rag in your car at all times. Then you put it back in, all the way to the bottom, whoops, and pull it out again. And then you can check your oil level.
Basically, I haven't felt confident that the people I was dealing with would give me the same type of answers that they might give to a man. Perhaps it's just past experience, or could be my nature, but I feel generally that men don't think women are perhaps interested, or they wouldn't know anyway, so why bother?
Now the thing is, the safety latch is in a slightly different spot on pretty much every car, so you have to kind of stick your finger in there until you find it. That's it. And they always either push up or to the side. So when you find it, good, good.
I stopped going to my dealer at one point because I thought they were just trying to rip me off, basically. You know, they would find things, every time I went, they would find something, you know, and the car seemed to be fine, and I couldn't argue with them, you know. I had no knowledge of the car's interior at all, you know. You think women don't have a clue, and in many cases, of course, they're right.
It's a gasket there.
My dad really likes it. He's been involved in cars all his life. His grandfather had a service station, so he's been in shops since he was in diapers. And I don't think he really expected me to get into this industry, but it's been fun. We have a lot to talk about now.
I've turned it that far. You put the jack under there for support, but before you put it up any farther, you're going to loosen your wheel nuts. Because if you have the vehicle in the air, your tire's going to want to spin. A lot of the customers that I know, that I deal with, the wives look after the cars. the husband's work. I know one particular example where the husband takes whatever car has gas in it in the morning. The wife does all that. She puts all the gas in, she checks all the oil, she does all the maintenance. So just turn it down, there you go. Yeah.
When you go to the repair shop, ask lots of questions. I don't know of any mechanics who don't like talking about cars. I'll love talking about cars. So take the time, don't feel intimidated. Ask to see your car, ask them to explain to you what it is that you want. Don't walk away feeling that you might have been cheated or feeling that you're not quite clear on what you just had done to your car.
One of my favorite t-shirts reads, "Age and treachery will overcome youth and inexperience every time." Well, maybe not every time. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
You know, the interior design of this vehicle stands in stark contrast to the exterior. I forgot my lines again, Dad. I think I'm gonna go back and practice. You know, it's a real joy when you find something a little different. Well, this week on Test Drive, we take a look at this Mercedes-Benz G500, and it more than qualifies as different. But you know, there's an old saying, you should never judge a book, or in this case a Benz, by its cover, as you're about to see.
The G-Wagon was commissioned in 1974 and brought to market in 1979. Since that time, the exterior style has remained all but unchanged. The same, however, cannot be said for the rest of the design. For example, power comes from the same 5-litre V8 that sees service in the S-Class. With 292 horsepower and 336 pounds-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM, there is never a lack of grunt. In high range, the performance is such that it manages to motivate a full 5,500 pounds of sheet metal and leather to 100 kilometers an hour in just over 10 seconds. Drop the transfer case into 4 low and the tremendous torque makes the steepest grade a non-issue. It really does do the truck justice.
You know, while the body may be showing its age, the all-wheel drive system certainly isn't. It is indeed state-of-the-art, featuring an electronic stability control. Now, this allows the vehicle to right minor oversteer or understeer by braking the appropriate wheel. It also uses that basic architecture for the all-wheel drive system. For instance, if this wheel starts to spin, it brakes it, forcing the power to that wheel. And it does that to all 4, so that any given wheel, the one with grip, is the one that gets the power. Now, if that's not enough, there's 3 buttons on the dash. These things allow you to lock the front, center, and rear differential. Indeed, it's that facet that gives this thing its tremendous off-road ability.
The lone weak points with the 4-wheel drive system are the tyres. Rather than being a hefty set of mudders, they are more geared to light off-road duty and on-road performance, because in thick goo, the tread clogs with mud, increasing the risk of getting stuck quite substantially.
Yeah! Now, when I say unstoppable, I mean unstoppable. The back end of this G500 comes with mixed blessings. On a positive note, when you fold and tumble the rear seats forward, you can hold an enormous amount of cargo in here. Not so much because it's wide, but because it's very tall. Now, on the downside, there's 2 important factors. First of all, when you look in the rear view mirror, all you see is this wiper, a brake light, this spare tyre, and the middle headrest on the rear seat. It all but renders the rear view mirror redundant. And then the second thing, well, shame on you, Mercedes-Benz, because there's nothing more than 3 regular bolts holding this very expensive spare tyre on. Anyone with adjustable wrench and a little bit of time could take your tyre for a walk, and without your permission.
The Big G rides on solid axles back and front with coil springs and gas-charged shocks at each corner. The design is such that it manages to take the sting out of a rough road. Perhaps more surprisingly was the manner in which the G500 ran the pylon test. Certainly body roll is an issue, and the electronic stability control program works overtime as you encroach on the limits, but when all is said and done, it's as good as any SUV offered. Off-road, the amount of suspension travel and decent articulation keeps the wheels planted, and therefore they can do their best work. The other noteworthy point is the direct and connected feel imparted by the recirculating ball steering. Many of these off-road raiders tend to feel rather numb on centre. The Merc, by contrast, is confident.
You know, the interior of this vehicle stands in stark contrast to the exterior theme, primarily because it's thoroughly modern. You get all of the comfort convenience items: power windows, locks, mirrors, a power tilt and telescopic steering wheel. You even get heated rear seats. You also get a good nav system that gives you clear and concise instructions. The anomaly is that they don't label the streets. However, there is a downfall, and you knew there had to be one, and it's this. Believe it or not, you're looking at the cup holder. Now, if the rest of the car were engineered like this thing, we would not be off-road.
Married to this motor is a 5-speed automatic that comes with a manual mode. On-road, changing your own gears is sort of passé. However, off-road, it allows you to take advantage of the engine's braking power, allowing a graceful descent without having to ride the brakes. Stopping power comes from 4-wheel discs and a good anti-lock system that includes brake assist. The latter intervenes automatically if the driver is too gentle in a critical situation. It builds up maximum braking force in a fraction of a second, reducing the stopping distance significantly, something that is really needed given the G-Wagon's heft.
If Arnold Schwarzenegger had stayed in his native Austria, he might perhaps have been the pin-up boy for the G500 rather than the ugly Hummer. That aside, if you can get over the G's rather awkward looks, you'll find one very capable vehicle. Not only is it well equipped and comfortable on the highway, when you get into this environment, well, it's all but unstoppable.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns maintaining the correct brake fluid level in your vehicle. It's important that you never let the brake fluid drop too low. If the fluid level gets too low, air will enter the hydraulic system and you'll get a condition we refer to as a spongy pedal. When you apply the brake pedal, it'll feel spongy because you're compressing air that's entered the hydraulic system. You'll have to refill the brake system and in many cases bleed the brakes to get rid of that condition. Now, it's normal that the brake fluid level declines slowly as the linings wear. That's part of how a brake system constantly adjusts itself, by taking in more fluid as the linings wear. However, if you've lost a significant portion of the brake fluid, you may want to pull the wheels and make sure that the linings aren't close to being completely worn out, as well as topping up and bleeding the brake fluid system. You also don't want to overfill the brake master cylinder, because an overfilled master cylinder can lead to dragging brakes in hot weather. It needs a little bit of room for expansion when the brakes heat up. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Dodge Razor. Isn't that great? The Razor was inspired by the classic European sports cars of the late 50s and early 60s. Minimalist in design, but with maximum performance.
Razor has a pretty simple shape, very pure. But when I was designing, I made sure that each line is filled with passion and emotion and tension. And also I wanted the car to be describable in just few lines, so that it will be very memorable and recognizable in the first sight. And I think it's definitely a memorable car. You can't forget about it after you see it. Just so simple, and impact is pretty strong, I believe. Also, the roof line dramatically drops toward rear and to intersect with the rear fender surface to create the housing for tail lamp. And the same thing happened for the front, where the front hood surface intersects with the front fender surface to create the housing for the headlamp.
This isn't a guy's car too, is it? I mean,
It's definitely guys and girls. It could go either way. It's just a pure driving machine. I want young buyers to buy this car or to be able to afford this car, first of all, and enjoy driving to its fullness. And I want them to enjoy their lifestyle as well. It's 2.4 liter, 4-cylinder. We are trying to use the same corporate off-the-shelf product. This is not production car, but if it ever gets to production, we will try to use as many off-the-shelf components to lower the price.
Got your fingers crossed, man?
Yes, and I will be the first buyer.
It's time to wrap up our long-term Honda Insight. One thing we've noticed is that although it was introduced back in 2000, the car continues to be a head-turner. Now, the design obviously plays a big part in it, but maybe also the fact that there are very few on the road. Here's a tale of the sales tape, and as you can see, it's pretty bleak. Now, this all-aluminum unibody Insight is without a doubt the most technologically sophisticated vehicle on the market. And with a price of $26,000, Honda figures it's losing $15,000 per vehicle. Now, to review, the Insight is powered by a 1-liter 3-cylinder gasoline engine which pumps out 67 horses. Now, if you need some extra torque, the electric motor kicks in. It's called Integrated Motor Assist. More power without burning more fuel. And you could drive up to 1,200 kilometers between fill-ups. Now, we've had a chance to drive the Insight in winter conditions, and although the white stuff has been scarce this year, equipped with winter tires, driving the Insight has been a breeze. You know, one of the neat things about this Honda Insight is the auto stop technology. You come up to a stop sign like this, put the shifter into neutral, car stops. When you're ready to go, back into gear, engine starts automatically, and you're on your way. Pretty cool. In fact, I think this car is cool, and we hate to take it back to Honda, but such is life. All right, let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Hey Brad, that auto shutoff feature's nothing new in the Insight. Jim Kenzie's had that feature on all his cars for years. Pull up to a traffic light or a stop sign, they just croak. It's actually called lack of tune-ups. But maybe Jim would tell you it was fuel-saving measure, just like the Honda Insight. Anyhow, what I want to talk about this week is engine gasket failure. I'm sure you're aware that inside your engine you've got coolant circulating and you've got engine oil circulating. And in many areas of the engine, those two vital fluids are separated by one thin gasket. If that gasket leaks or fails, engine antifreeze or coolant can go in and mix with the crankcase oil. For all intents and purposes, you've got a leak that you never see. If you have an external leak of coolant on the engine, you see a puddle of green or red coolant pooled underneath the vehicle. But if you have a gasket failed inside the engine, you can lose coolant into the crankcase oil and never see any leak on the floor of the garage or your parking spot. What you want to check for in that case, if you're losing coolant and not seeing it go anywhere, is make sure that you haven't got a case where the antifreeze or coolant is mixing with the engine oil. Some of the symptoms that you would notice would be, in addition to the declining coolant level, an increase in the engine oil level. And when you take off the oil filler cap and look inside the engine, you'll actually see signs of contamination. A jelly-like or thick substance that's got a bit of a colored tint to it that matches the dye color in your engine coolant. If you've got green or yellow coolant, you've got a greenish yellow substance up inside the valve cover. So look for these signs, and if you see them, investigate the possibility that you've got failed intake manifold gaskets, maybe a leaking head gasket or a cracked casting in the engine. In any case, if you're consistently losing coolant into the engine oil and you leave it unchecked for any length of time, it's a slow death for your engine. It's something you've got to deal with so that you don't ruin that engine. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2002.
About 20 years ago, a young Canadian sued his insurance company because the higher premium he had to pay was based not on his driving record, he didn't have one, it was based strictly on his age. His point was that's discrimination and that's illegal. Well, turns out he won the case. So the rate structures were changed and people over 25 paid more money than they otherwise would have. Of course, by the time the case got through the courts, he was over 25, so he lost anyway. But in another 25 years, he's going to face another problem, because we're now finding out that the worst drivers aren't the men under 25, it's the folks over 75, the wrinklies, as the Brits call them. Older drivers are now statistically our worst drivers. It stands to reason as you get older, your eyesight goes, your reflexes go. I mean, if you're an athlete and you're a gymnast, let's say, you're baked at 20. If you're a pro athlete in anything but stock car racing and curling, you're finished at 35. So as you get older, it's going to happen. Now, normally for driving on the road, our experience can compensate for our deteriorating skills. Statistically, people between about 35 and 55 are our safest drivers. But as you get older, it starts to happen. You may have heard about that case in Toronto where an 84-year-old woman hit a pedestrian, dragged her 1.5 miles, killed her, had no idea she'd done it. Now, doctors are supposed to tell the government when one of their patients is no longer fit to drive. It's not going to happen. A doctor's been your doctor for 20 years. He's not going to phone the cops and snitch on you. Just isn't going to happen. Now, my mother-in-law, when she turned 80, she thought she'd have to take a driver's test. Not anymore, not in our province. She walked into a room with a bunch of other people. The instructor talked to them. And if he figured they could chew gum and walk at the same time, boom, there's your license for another 2 years. Well, that's nuts. Now, mother-in-law had the sense at age 84 to say, I'm finished. She turned her license in voluntarily. Not enough people are doing this. What we're going to have to go back to is driver's tests. And that's not discriminatory. I'm talking driver's tests for everybody. Every 5 years, a real driver's test, not just parallel parking and three-point turns, a real driver's test. This way, we get lousy drivers off the road, no matter how old they are. I'm Jim Kinsey.
A few final thoughts on the Honda Insight before we go. As I mentioned earlier, since its debut in 2000, the Insight sales have been rather slim. But coming to North America very shortly will be the Honda Civic Hybrid with the same system as we have in the Insight. And you know, if one of the world's most popular vehicles can't succeed, maybe Honda might throw in the towel on this one, but hopefully it won't come to that. And incidentally, we'll be putting the Civic Hybrid in our long-term fleet, so stay tuned for updates. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
And the roof, clamshell roof, kind of like the airplane canopy as well. And everything is taut. It's kind of like when you comb your hair back and pull it into a ponytail. It's a lot of energy and tension.
TSN's Motoring 2002 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.